So this particular class of object-oriented programming will discuss much more about the C++ programming basics. That what we are going to discuss is the output using cout, and then we'll discuss more about the directives, and then input with cin function, and then we discuss about the Boolean type function of C++, and then we discuss about the setw manipulator, and finally the type conversions. So this is especially for you, my dear students and young researchers, and you can reach me at dr.christoananth@gmail.com. So before beginning the session, let me thank God for giving me this golden opportunity to deliver this useful session, to share my knowledge among my fellow national, international participants, students and young researchers. So today's class will discuss about the basic input-output operations in C++, and then we discuss about the various header files which are available in C++. Generally, it can be suitable for the the input as well as the output operations, and then we discuss about the the output function cout and the input function cin in C++. Then we discuss the difference, the salient differences between CERR and then cout function. Okay, and then we'll discuss much more about buffer, how buffer affects programming in C++, and we discuss two examples, one in C and another in C++, which includes the most important point, like clearing the input buffer causes undesired results. And then we'll discuss about the Boolean data type in C++, and we discuss much more about some important points about the Boolean data type, and finally we are going to end with the C++ manipulator setw function. Of course, I have already posted the independent works in the Google Classroom, and we have at regular intervals some short videos to discuss the knowledge in our topics. So this is the basic input-output function in C++. Generally, when you talk about C++, there are several functions. There are several functions of the libraries that come inbuilt. C++, when you take in this case, we have several libraries which allows you to perform some input as well as the output operations even. So corresponding to the input that is being given, the output is going to be produced in the form of bytes. Okay, so what you call it to be streams. So you can say the streams of data are being produced in the output. So here we have two types of streams. One is input stream and then output stream. If you take in the case of the input stream, if the direction of the flow of byte is from the device to the main memory, then you call it as input stream. But when the direction of flow of bytes is from the memory to the device, okay, memory to the display screen, then it is called as output stream. Okay. So here in the case of the program, we have cin as well as cout. So input is given in the form of the keyboard, okay, whereas output you get it via the screen, okay, the display screen. But in the the screen which you're trying to display the output, we have two functions called as CERR and then CLOG. So this is how you process the input and output, and how you are able to get the input, and you are going to produce the output in the screen. So here are the the header files which is available in C++ for the input as well as output operations. Here we have IO stream, IO manipulation, F stream as well. So with the case of input output stream, we have the header file which contains definition of objects like cin, cout, CERR and so on. Then you have the input output manipulators, IO manip. So here the methods which are declared in these files are used for manipulating the strings. Okay, so here we have set w, precision, and so on. And then we have the file stream, f stream. So here the header file is used to handle the data which is being read from the file as input, or data being returned into the file as output. So we have the input as well as output functions. Input you call it as cin, and output you call it to be cout. Okay, so cin generally taking the inputs, cout printing the outputs. So these are the cout and cin in C++. Generally it can be used for taking the inputs and printing the outputs. So in order to use the cin and cout, you have to include the header file IO stream. Okay, IO stream. You have to include it at the beginning of the C++ program. And when in case of the standard output stream, generally you include the standard output device called as the display screen. So here in the C++ output statement, you try to include the paths which is going to display produce this display screen. So that's the reason you include some data. Generally it is being inserted. So once it's being inserted on the cout using this insertion operator, then it gets displayed on the screen successfully. Okay. So that's the reason in the program, like if you start with the hash input IO stream, input output stream, using namespace std function, in main function, character sample, object oriented programming. Here you use the double less than symbol. So this is what I'm talking about. Okay, so it's being inserted in order to display the results. Okay, so cout double less than symbol sample for all students and researchers, and then return 0. So you are going to get the output as object oriented programming, and then hyphen for all students and researchers. So this is how you get the output corresponding to this the output characters that you are trying to display. So this is what I am talking about. This is an insertion operator. So here the insertion operator inserts the value of the string variable sample followed by the string for all the students and researchers in the standard output string cout. Okay. And similarly with the case of cin, we have double greater than symbol. Okay. So when you take in the case of cin, you know that it is the standard input stream. So that's the reason cin is generally you call it to be inside the I stream. Okay. I stream is used to read input from the standard input device, which is usually a keyboard. So the extraction operator extracts the data from the object cin, which is entered using the keyboard. So that's the reason in the program you include hash include IO stream using namespace std function int main. Here you initialize the variable called age, and then cout you are going to print. Whenever you are going to print, you print it with a double less than symbol. Enter your age, and then C input you are getting the age. You are inputting the age. So that's the reason you have double greater than symbol, and then cout your age is. Okay. So this is input is nothing but the age, okay, and return 0. Okay, so whenever you are asked with the enter your age 18, then it says your age is 18. So the object cin is connected to the input device, and the age entered by the user is extracted from cin using the extraction operator double greater than symbol, and the extracted data is then stored in the variable called as age, which is present in the right side of the extraction operator. And then you have the unbuffered standard error stream CERR, so which is the standard error stream which is used to output the errors. So it's also an instance of the output stream class. So when CERR in C++ is unbuffered, then one needs to display the error message immediately. So you can say that it does not have any buffer to store the error message, and you can display it later. So this is what we are talking about, CERR, unbuffered standard error stream. So that's difference. There's some salient differences between standard error string and then cout function. So between CERR and cout, generally it comes to redirecting the output using cout. That gets redirected to file if you use CERR. Okay. So if in that case the error doesn't get stored in the files, when you go for CERR, the error doesn't get stored in the file, which means that it is unbuffered. Okay, which means that it can't store the message. Like it is similar to normally if you try to delete it, you press the delete key, but if you press shift plus delete or maybe control plus delete, it gets deleted permanently. It doesn't store it. So similar case happens over here. When you go for CERR, it doesn't store it. Okay. So in the program we can use the CERR. So hash include IO string using namespace std function int main, and then CERR is less than symbol and error occurred. Okay, return 0. So if you go for this less than symbol, of course we are printing the output, but here instead of cout you have CERR, which means that this an error occurred, okay, doesn't get stored. Okay, but anyway you are going to get the output as an error occurred, but it is not get stored. And then we have clog, buffered standard error string. So it's also an instance of output stream class, and it is going to display errors. But when compared to CERR, here the error is first inserted into the buffer and it is stored into the buffer until it is not fully filled. Okay, so that's the reason this error message will be displayed on the screen also. For example, here in the program hash include IO stream using namespace std function int main and then clog instead of CERR or maybe cout, you are including a clog, which is the buffered standard error string. Okay. So it has an error occurred and then return 0. Okay. So here the output you have an error occurred. So here it is at this point of time we are introducing a new concept called buffer, which is the temporary storage area. Okay, and all the the input as well as output devices will have the input buffer and then output buffer even. So when streams are buffered, in the case of standard input, when we press the key on the keyboard, it is not sent to your program, but it is buffered by the OS till the time is allotted to that program. So this buffer, this concept called input buffer or maybe output buffer, definitely it is going to affect the programming, and you may need to clear the unwanted buffer. Okay, so that you tend to get the next input in the desired container and not in the buffer of the previous variable. For example, in C, whenever you go for inputting, you go for scanf. Whenever you are going to output, you go for printf. Okay, so whenever you go for scanf, like getting the input, the input of the character array or maybe a character. Similarly, for the case of C++ statement, you go with cin statement, which means same. We are going to input a character array or string. In both the cases in C, we have to clear the input buffer. Else, what happens is the desired input is actually occupied by the buffer of the previous variable. Okay, but not the container what you are intended to. Okay. So when you press the enter on the output screen after the first input, as the buffer of the previous variable was the space of the new container, the program skips the following input of the container. So this is how buffer is going to constant. Maybe definitely it is going to affect the program. So in the case of C, we discussed about an example. This is not clearing the input buffer would cause undesired results. Okay. So here we display a C code to display why not clearing the input buffer. Definitely it is going to cause undesired outputs. Okay. So here we have hash include stdio.h and in main function you are going to initialize a character string of 80 length size. It is ch, okay, and then you are going to scan the input from the user, and then for example scanf modulus s str function, the string function, and then you are going to scan the character from the user, okay, for example a, and then ch is equal to get char. Now you are going to print the character array, and you are going to print the object oriented programming. So that's the reason you go for printf function modulus s slash in the str string function, okay, but however it does not print the character a, so that's the reason you go for printf modulus c ch, okay, and finally you are going to return 0. So whenever you go with the input object oriented programming and then you press A, you are going to get the object oriented programming as the output. Similarly, in the case of C++, only the set of statements differs. Other than that, everything is fine. So it's a C++ code to explain why not clearing the input buffer causes undesired outputs. So it is hash include IO string, hash include vector function, okay, and then using namespace std function int main function, and then you have int a character ch of 80. Same thing happens when you enter the number from the enter the input from the user. Let us take in the case we input 4, okay, so c in double greater than a, okay, and then we are going to get the input from the user, okay. So the object oriented programming we are going to get it. So c in dot get line character comma 80, okay, so it's going to print 4, okay, so c out a, okay, and then n1. A is actually what you have inputted is 4, so finally you are going to print the string, okay. It doesn't print the string because c out ch n1 and then return 0. So when you are going to give the input as maybe 4 and then object oriented programming, it is going to display the output as 4, but it doesn't display the string. So we'll discuss much more about occupied buffer, which is the desired module of the buffer code, which is going to affect the programming. And both the C as well as C++ we saw an example, okay, so which means that the output is not printed as desired because we are able to display the number, but we are not displaying the output called object oriented programming. And the reason is the occupied buffer, which means the slash n character is going to remain in the buffer and is being read as the next input. So what we are going to do, you are going to resolve it. We are going to use the while get character function. So typing while get char of full exclamatory mark, the inversion equal to slash n, it is going to read the buffer characters till the end, and it is going to discard them including the new line. And if you try to use them after the scanf statement, definitely it is going to clear the input buffer and it is going to allow the input in the desired content. So that's the reason you use the while get character function. So this is the significance of using while get character function. So it's a C code to explain why adding this while get character function after the scanf statement, it is going to flush the input buffer. So we are going to include hash include stdio.h and then int main function, character string function of 80 size, and then ch. You are going to scan the input from the user object oriented programming. Okay, so scanf modulus s str, and then it's going to flush the standard input. It is going to clear the input buffer. So that's the reason you use this function while get character of exclamatory mark equal to slash n. It is going to scan the character from the user. So ch is equal to get char, okay, and then you are going to print the character array. So which means you are going to print the object oriented programming. So print f modulus s slash n the str, the string function, and then finally printing the character a will print a this time. Just print f modulus c this ch, and then you are going to return 0. So whenever you are going to input object oriented programming, and then if you press a, it will get the same thing, object oriented programming and then a. So this is the significance of using the while get character function. It is going to resolve the previous situation. And then there's also another way using f-flush standard in function. So whenever you type f-flush standard in after the scanf statement, it is going to clear the input buffer just like the previous case, but use of it is avoided and is termed to be undefined for input string as per the the C++ higher standards. So in the case of C++, you use the cin.ignore the numeric limits equal to max function /n. So you type cin.ignore numeric limits max /n after the cin statement. It is going to discard in the everything in the using in the input statement. So if you see in the C++ code, you use the cin.ignore numeric limits stream size maximum function. It is going to discard the input buffer. So hash include IO stream. For the stream size, you go for hash include IOS, and for the numeric limits, you go for hash include limits. Okay. So stream and then stream size and then numeric limits. So using namespace std function, int main function, and then int a character string of 80. You are going to enter the input from the user. For example, 4. Okay. So see input. You are going to maybe input it as 4. It is going to discard the input buffer. Okay. So cin.ignore numeric limits of stream size of max function. And afterwards, you are going to get the input from the user. Maybe like object-oriented programming, like cin.getLine str, 80. So it's going to print 4 and the another string as well. So printing the string, it will print the string. So see out string int 1. Okay, and then returns it. So whenever you are going to give the input as 4 and then object-oriented programming, it is going to display 4 and object-oriented. So f-flush is similar to the previous f-flush is similar to the while get character function of C. So it is going to perform the output just the same. And then you also have cin.synchronization function after the cin statement. It is going to discard all that is left in the buffer. Okay. So cin.sync doesn't work in all implementations. So you have a C++ code to explain how cin.sync function is going to discard the input buffer. So you have hash include IO stream, hash include IOS, hash include limits. Okay, you have the access to all the libraries using namespace std function, int main function, and then int a character string of 80. Now you are going to use the input get the input from the user. So 4, okay, maybe for example, cin, the input is a. Okay, so it's going to discard the input buffer. This statement cin.sync function. Okay, cin.sync function, and afterwards you are going to get the input from the user. Like for example, object-oriented programming. So that's the reason you go for cin.getLine string, 80, and it is going to print 4. So cout a n1. So it is going to print the string as of now. Okay. So cout string and then n1 returns it. So whenever the input 4 and then object-oriented programming is given, it is going to get the output as 4. Similarly, you have cin greater than ws function. After the, if you try to include after the cin statement, it will tell the compiler to ignore the buffer, and you can discard all the white spaces before the string or the character array. Okay. So same case, hash include IO stream, hash include vector function using namespace std, and then int main function, int a string yes. So you're going to initialize a and then string yes. Okay, and then you are going to enter the inputs, the same case cin greater than a. So it is going to discard the input buffer and the initial white spaces before the string, okay, or the array what you are trying to use. So that's the reason you go for cin greater than ws. Okay, and then afterwards you are going to get the input from the user. So get line cin, yes. This string is actually the object-oriented program. And finally, it is going to print 4 and object-oriented programming. So that's the reason cout a n1 and cout within that yes. Okay, so between A and S. So input, if you are giving as 4 and then object oriented programming, you are going to get the output as 4 and then object oriented. So this is the Boolean data type in C++. So whenever the several Boolean functions are there to support the functionalities of C++, generally we have exercised better control in certain situations for C++ programmers, and that's the reason you use bool function, bool. So for an example, you give it as bool b1 equal to true. So you are going to declare a Boolean variable b1 with the true value. Similarly, in C++, the data type bool has been introduced to hold a Boolean value, maybe true or maybe false. So true or false have been added as keywords in the C++ language, and there are some important points that you have to consider when you are dealing with the Boolean data type in C++. Normally, you consider that your default numeric value of true is 1 and default numeric value of false is 0. We can use the Boolean type variables or maybe values, maybe for true case or maybe false case, in the mathematical expressions also. For example, int x is equal to false plus true plus 6. It is going to be valid and the expression on the right will evaluate to 7. Okay, so like false 0, true is actually 1, plus 6 is actually 7. Okay, so it is possible to convert the data type integers or floating point values. You can convert it to the Boolean type. For example, you have the statements Boolean x is equal to 0, it's false. Okay, Boolean y equal to 100, it is said to be true. Boolean z is equal to 15.75. Similarly, this is the floating point, it is said to be true. So this is a C++ program to illustrate the Boolean function, Boolean data type with C++. So hash include IO stream using namespace std function int main, and then int x1 equal to 10, x2 equal to 20, m equal to 2. Now here you introduce this Boolean type, Boolean b1 and b2. Okay, so b1 equal to x1. Okay, we compare it with x2. Okay, generally b1 x1, you are going to b1 x1. What is b1 x1? So here Boolean type is b1. Okay, x1 is 10, x2 is 20, m is equal to 2. Okay. So x1 b1 equal to x1, you compare it with x2, it's said to be false, and b2 equal to x1, it is less than x2, it is said to be true. So see out the b1 is, you are going to print the b1. So see out b2 is, you are going to print it as b2. Okay. Finally, you are going to check with Boolean b3 function, Boolean b3 equal to true. If b3, then see out is yes. Okay, else see out is no. Okay, and then int x3 equal to false plus 5 multiplied by m hyphen b3. Okay, so see out it is x3 and return 0. So output b1 is equal to 0, b2 equal to 1. So you are going to check it out both the cases, and it is going to print this yes. Okay, and then false plus 5. Okay, false plus 5 multiply by m. So you are going to get the result. Finally, you are going to end with the C++ manipulator set w function, set width function. So here, C++ manipulator, we have the set width function. We are going to set the width, and this manipulator is used to specify the minimum number of character positions on the output field a variable will definitely consume. So that's the reason you use a manipulator function, IO manipulator. Just like IO stream, you have IO manipulator. So hash include IO stream, hash include manipulator function. So the reason you use the manipulator function, you can use the set width function. So using namespace std in main function, see out, you are going to set the width of 10, and see out it is 22. Okay, and 1 return 0. So output you are going to get as 24, okay, which is having the width of 10. So this is an example of how you use the C++ manipulator. Once again, hash include string, hash include IO string, hash include IO manipulation using namespace yesterday function in main. Cout no set width of 42, and then set width of 6. It's actually we are setting it up to 42. Set width of 6 of several elements you include as 8. You are fixing the limit now within from 12 to 34, and you have I string is hello world. So after defining all this one, then you define the array size, character array of it, and is set width of 6. You're going to print the cout input from. Okay, input from actually the hello world. Okay, with set width 6 gave. Actually, it is going to print as hello. Okay, and it runs 0. So output no set width of 42, set width of 6 of 42, set width of 6, several elements 89, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so input from hello world with set width of 6 gave hello. Okay, so you're going to print it up. So okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then space. Okay, so that's the reason you get errors. So these are the independent works. I've already given this independent works in the Google Classroom, so you can have a note about it. Classification of data structures, arrays, iterations, invariants, lists, files, and records. And then we discuss about the characteristics of string. So please do complete them. You have 1 week of time to complete it. As I told you, you should have like code, you should have topic, you should have description, explanation, and some examples given to